Most Toyota hybrid owners never think about this part until it's already too late. It costs less than $10, it takes about 15 minutes to deal with, and it sits in a location most people never even look at. But when it fails, and it does fail, it does not just cause a warning light. It causes coolant contamination, inverter damage, and repair bills that can reach $4,000 to $8,000. The part is called the inverter coolant reservoir cap, and by 50,000 miles, yours may already be showing signs of failure. This is not a scare tactic. It is a pattern that shows up consistently across Toyota hybrids, from the Prius to the Camry hybrid to the RAV4 hybrid. And once you understand why it happens, what it causes, and how a $10 replacement prevents it, you will never look at your hybrid the same way again. Let's start from the beginning. What the inverter cooling system actually does. Your Toyota hybrid doesn't just have one cooling system, it has two. Most drivers know about the engine coolant, the traditional system that keeps the combustion engine from overheating. But many drivers do not realize that the hybrid inverter, the high-voltage component that converts direct current power from the battery into alternating current power for the electric motor, has its own dedicated cooling circuit that is entirely separate from the engine. This inverter cooling system runs a specialized coolant through a small pump, past the power control unit, and through its own reservoir. That reservoir is a white or semi-transparent plastic tank, usually located near the front of the engine bay, slightly separate from the main engine coolant overflow tank. It has its own dedicated cap. That cap is the $10 part this entire video is about. The inverter in a Toyota hybrid operates under serious thermal stress. During acceleration, highway driving, and especially in hot climates, it generates significant heat. Without stable coolant flow and a sealed system, the inverter and the power control unit that manages it are exposed to temperatures they were never designed to handle continuously. When this system works properly, it works silently. Most owners never know it exists, but when the reservoir cap fails, the entire balance of that closed cooling loop is disrupted, and the damage starts quietly and builds fast. What actually goes wrong with the cap? The inverter coolant reservoir cap on Toyota hybrids is a pressure holding cap. It works much like a radiator cap. It maintains a specific pressure range inside the inverter cooling circuit. That pressurization raises the boiling point of the coolant, prevents air from entering the lines, and keeps circulation consistent even when temperatures spike. By 30,000 to 50,000 miles, the rubber seal inside the cap has been exposed to thousands of heating and cooling cycles. Heat expansion, contraction, chemical exposure from the coolant, and simple age all degrade that rubber. It begins to lose its ability to hold pressure. In many cases, it starts allowing tiny amounts of air into the system. Here is why that matters. Air in a cooling circuit does not just reduce efficiency. AIR creates hot spots. Air bubbles travel through the lines and settle around the inverter and power control unit, interrupting coolant contact with the surfaces that need it most. The inverter begins running hotter than it should. The power control unit follows. At first, nothing shows on the dashboard. No warning light, no dramatic symptom. The car still drives normally. But internally, the high-voltage electronics are being slowly stressed beyond their rated thermal range, cycle after cycle. In some Toyota hybrid models, this gradual overheating of the inverter will eventually trigger a hybrid system warning or a red triangle alert on the dashboard. But often, by the time that light appears, the inverter coolant pump has already been damaged from running under low pressure or aerated conditions, or the inverter itself has experienced enough thermal cycling that its internal components have begun to degrade. The failure mode that results is one of the most expensive in the Toyota hybrid catalog. Inverter replacement on a Prius, Camry hybrid, or RAV4 hybrid can run anywhere from $2,500 to over $8,000, depending on model year and whether the power control unit is also affected. Why this happens before 50,000 miles? There is a specific reason this becomes a concern before the 50,000-mile mark rather than later. The inverter cooling system on Toyota hybrids is a closed, pressurized loop. It does not get flushed at standard service intervals the way engine coolant sometimes does. Most Toyota dealer service reminders do not flag the inverter cooling circuit for inspection until much later, if at all. Many independent shops do not even know this separate reservoir exists. This means the cap sits on that reservoir from day one, doing its job silently, never inspected, never replaced, until something goes wrong. The rubber seal inside is not a high-visibility maintenance item. It does not appear on most service interval stickers. Toyota does not issue a broad recall on it. But the physics of rubber degradation under thermal cycling are unavoidable. After 3 to 5 years and 30 to 50,000 miles of use, a coolant reservoir cap that was never designed to be a lifetime component has reached the edge of its reliable service life. The $10 replacement is not a performance upgrade. It is restoring a sealing component to the condition it had when the car left the factory, and doing it proactively, before any symptoms appear, is the entire point. How to check your inverter coolant reservoir cap. Open the hood and locate the two coolant reservoirs in your Toyota hybrid engine bay. The main engine coolant overflow reservoir is usually the larger of the two and may be labeled with a temperature warning symbol. The inverter coolant reservoir is typically smaller and may be labeled with an EV or inverter designation, depending on the model year. On the Prius, it is often found on the passenger side near the front of the engine bay. On the Camry hybrid and RAV4 hybrid, positioning varies slightly, but it is typically visible near the firewall or alongside the main coolant bottle. The cap on the inverter reservoir will look similar to a standard coolant cap. Remove it only when the system is completely cold. Never open it when the engine has been running recently. The system holds pressure and hot coolant can spray. Once removed, inspect the rubber seal on the underside of the cap. Healthy rubber is soft, pliable, and forms an even ring without cracks, hardening, or deformation. If the rubber feels stiff, shows cracking, feels uneven, or the cap no longer creates a firm resistance when you press it down and turn it, the seal has already degraded enough to compromise the system. Even if the rubber visually looks acceptable, a cap that is over 4 years old or past 40,000 miles on a vehicle that has not had it replaced is worth swapping on principle alone, given what it protects. This is where some owners make a mistake. The inverter coolant reservoir cap is not the same part as the engine coolant overflow cap, even though they may look nearly identical. They are rated to different pressure specifications. Installing the wrong cap can result in either insufficient pressure buildup in the inverter cooling circuit or excessive pressure that stresses the reservoir itself. Always source a replacement cap that is specifically designated for the inverter coolant circuit on your exact model and year. Toyota OEM caps for this application are available at Toyota dealerships and are typically priced between $8 and $15. Aftermarket equivalents from reputable suppliers are also available and generally acceptable, provided they are listed specifically for the inverter coolant reservoir on your vehicle. When you receive the new cap, compare it to the old one before installation. The profile, depth, and pressure rating should match. The rubber seal on the new cap should be visibly softer and more uniform than what you removed. Installation is straightforward. Thread the new cap onto the reservoir opening and tighten it to its locked position. There is no torque specification to worry about. Firm hand tightening to the stop point is sufficient. What to check while you're there? Since you're already looking at the inverter cooling circuit, take an extra 2 minutes to inspect a few things that directly affect the same system. Look at the coolant level inside the inverter reservoir. The fluid should sit between the minimum and maximum lines on the side of the tank. The coolant itself should be a clean color, typically pink or blue depending on Toyota specification, and should not appear murky, brown, or discolored. Discoloration in the inverter coolant can indicate cross-contamination from a failing reservoir or compromised circuit, which requires more detailed diagnosis. Look at the hoses connected to the inverter reservoir. Run a hand along each one. They should feel firm but flexible. Any hose that feels brittle, has visible cracking near the clamps, or feels soft and spongy has reached the end of its reliable service life and should be replaced before it fails under pressure. Finally, listen to the pump on startup. On many Toyota hybrids, the inverter coolant pump runs briefly when the car is first switched on, before the engine starts. This is an electric pump, separate from the water pump. You can often hear a faint whirring from near the front of the engine bay during those first seconds. If that sound has become inconsistent, louder than usual, or absent on cold starts, the pump itself may be showing early signs of wear. A pump inspection is worth adding to your next service if you notice anything unusual. The bigger picture for Toyota hybrid owners. Toyota hybrids are among the most reliable vehicles on the road. Prius models regularly reach 200,000 to 300,000 miles with standard maintenance. The engineering that makes that longevity possible is built around stable thermal management, both for the combustion engine and for the high-voltage hybrid components. The reason hybrid systems hold up so well for so long is that Toyota designed them with serious engineering margins and put real thought into protecting the most heat-sensitive components. But that engineering only delivers its full potential when the sealing and maintenance components that protect those systems are kept in working condition. A degraded inverter coolant reservoir cap does not announce itself. It does not throw a code. It does not make noise. It just quietly allows the precision thermal management Toyota designed into your hybrid to slowly degrade. And without that thermal stability, one of the most expensive components in the car is being slowly worn down by heat it was never supposed to experience. $10, 15 minutes, a rubber seal the size of a coin. That's the margin between a hybrid that reaches 300,000 miles and one that needs an inverter at 70,000 miles. Check yours before 50,000 miles. Replace it if it's showing any sign of age. And while you're there, check the fluid level, inspect the hoses, and listen to the pump on your next cold start. These are the checks that most Toyota hybrid owners never think to perform, and they are the exact checks that separate the vehicles that last from the vehicles that become cautionary stories in online forums. Your Toyota was built to go the distance. Make sure the $10 part keeping its most expensive component cool is doing its job. If you are enjoying this video, consider watching the next one where I cover the exact maintenance steps that Toyota hybrid owners must do before 100,000 miles to keep the battery and drivetrain running strong.